Good morning. Great to see you all. Hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend. We did pretty good in college football across the state of Florida with Florida State beating Alabama. I can tell you, we're in Tallahassee obviously for the job, and everyone was kind of like cautiously optimistic, but very much on edge because they just didn't know it was going to happen, right? 2 years ago, had a great season. Last year was really bad, and so it was like, what's going to happen? So there's a huge sense of relief that they were able to beat Alabama and look good doing it. And then you had Miami. It was a mild upset against Notre Dame. Notre Dame was sixth in the country, and they were able to do that. Obviously, everyone knew the Gators would win against Long Island. And then University of South Florida beat Boise State, which was ranked. I mean, they were in the top 20. So we'll see what happens with that. I think, we'd all like to see. In the whole playoff era, Florida State made it that first playoff year. I mean, that's probably, 10 years ago now. And since then, not one Florida school has even made it, to the playoff. I know UCF a few years back. I guess that would have been BCS probably back then when they did undefeated. So we'll see what happens with that. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are really happy with that. We are now in the height of hurricane season. It's been, I would say, relatively quiet. I think there have been some storms, fish storms. There is something that's being monitored. It's way too soon to know whether it's going to have any impact on Florida. A lot of the models have it being a fish storm, but it's too early for the models to be accurate. So we'll see. I will just say that September, as you get into September, this is kind of the height, certainly mid to late September, beginning of October, historically, about when you get storms. So just as a reminder, we've made permanent sales tax elimination on the disaster preparedness items. So if you haven't prepared, you have a chance to prepare. You don't necessarily want to wait till it's 100 miles offshore bearing towards Florida to go out and prepare, because then other people are doing that too, and you end up with lines and shortages and all this other stuff. So we're monitoring all this stuff. Obviously, we would like to have a season where we don't have any significant impacts. I think that'd be good for everybody, given that we've had 6 major hurricanes in 7 years. I'd like to get back on that stretch we had the previous 10 years where we had no hurricanes, and these things do come in bunches. So that may be what happens, but we got to prepare. So I would just let people know, just understand the season and keep the information coming, and do whatever you need to do to be able to prepare should we end up having to mobilize accordingly. Well, I'm great to be here today. I'm joined with Florida's Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, the Chuck Norris of Florida politics. FDLE Deputy Commissioner Shane Pollard, and last but certainly not least, our great sheriff from Seminole County, Dennis Lima, who's been fantastic on so many different issues. And we're here today because we have a lot of success that we're able to tout about our efforts to fight fentanyl in the state of Florida. And this is not an easy issue to deal with. This is something that, I don't even know when fentanyl started coming on the scene. I know 20 years ago, I don't think it was around. But this started coming on the scene, and there's a lot of toxic things that get out there, a lot of narcotics that can be very dangerous. I think the thing with fentanyl is it takes just a very small amount to be fatal. And what ends up happening is, and this happens, we've had people in this community obviously who've been affected by this. You have like some college student, and they're like, have exams or something, and then so someone's like, hey, take this pill, and they think it's something, and it ends up having fentanyl in it, and that can kill them just by taking one pill. This stuff gets laced in all kinds of things, and the amount of fentanyl that we've seized, I'll talk about in a minute through our program. It's not like it would kill like a dozen people. You're talking about enough fentanyl to kill tens of millions of people, and it doesn't even need to be that much of an amount to be able to do it. So this is something that is really, really significant. I don't think there's anybody in Florida that has not been impacted in one way or another maybe not you, maybe not your immediate family, but a coworker who's lost a family member, or a neighbor, or somebody maybe in your extended family. This is something that's been really significant. And I know a couple years ago we were hitting over 100,000 drug overdose deaths across the United States of America, and fentanyl is the main reason why it reached the levels that it has. Now, part of our approach to this is understanding we've done a lot on working with kids, and the First Lady has done a lot on letting kids know in school. She has a program called Your Facts, the Future, about the facts, your future, about how damaging this stuff can be. And this is not like it was like in the 60s. Some of these high school kids are smoking grass, whatever. Not that they should be doing it, but now you smoke something, if that has fentanyl in it, it's like playing Russian roulette with your life. So the stakes are so much higher. And I know a lot of parents get very, very concerned about this. And so educating about the risks so people know that this stuff is out there is really, really important. And you obviously want to be able to have an impact on the demand side. We've also done our CORE program, which is kind of a full spectrum response to opioid addiction and opioid overdoses. People can overdose, they get sent to the hospital, they get revived, they just kind of get put back on the street. Well, when that happens, you're likely going to end up using again. And so this is a full spectrum, once you get out of the hospital, still having support, and also being able to be put on a regimen if they need to be, so that they're not going back to that. And it's been very successful, and that's led in part to the reduction in opioid overdose deaths throughout the state of Florida, which we're very proud of. So the demand side is really, really important. Information, having ability to treat, all that is something we've really leaned in on. But you have to recognize that this stuff is pouring across the southern border, or it certainly was under the previous administration, in massive numbers. This is a huge business for drug cartels. People on the street can make a lot of money selling it, and this is something that we have to take very, very seriously from a law enforcement perspective. As we're working on blunting demand, as we're working on helping people who may be addicted, we got to throw the book at the people who are spewing this poison into our communities. And so in 2001, of course, I launched a number of emergency measures to help with the southern border that was happening in Texas, and they were able to do a lot of good work down there. And that was state law enforcement, state guard, National Guard, you name it. We also launched Operation Vigilant Sentry, which is our maritime operations to protect the peninsula of Florida from these vessels that come in, illegally. And the Coast Guard has always been the one that's been in charge of that. Certainly at the time under the Biden administration, there was not enough Coast Guard assets to be able to stop all these vessels. And so we deployed more than 250 officers and soldiers from State Guard, Fish and Wildlife, Emergency Management, so that they could fill the gaps and stop these vessels. And over the years with Operation Vigilant Sentry, there have been, this is just state, so the feds have done as much or more likely with the Coast Guard, but just our Operation Vigilant Sentry interdicted 19,000 illegal aliens, almost 18,000 repatriated to their home country, and more than 470 total vessels that were interdicted. And a lot of times you have these vessels, they have narcotics on them. They have other types of contraband on them, and usually a bunch of military-age foreign men. Is that what you want in your community? Narcotics and contraband and these military? No, of course not. So being able to do the problem, though, with how all the immigration stuff, like if they get to the shore, what would happen is Biden would just release them, or he'd send them somewhere else in the interior of the country. So we really had to work on interdicting at sea. When you interdict at sea, you give them to the Coast Guard, they take them back. That's the practice. Honestly, I think if they show up in the Keys, you should take them and send them back. Like, why would we, act like that's such a different thing? But nevertheless, that's how the federal government has historically treated it. So these were really important operations, and I guarantee you, those operations have saved lives. There's no question that that has happened. Now, we also knew that we needed to do more to support our local law enforcement and continue working with our state law enforcement agencies. So in 2023, we established the State Assistance for Fentanyl Eradication grant program. We call it the SAFE program, which gives law enforcement funding needed to conduct large-scale drug interdiction operations across the state of Florida. This has allowed local law enforcement agencies to effectively fight against drug trafficking and to get hundreds of pounds of deadly drugs off the street. So here we are now, 2 years later, and honestly, I mean, maybe even a little less by the time this got signed into law and everything. So 2 years, roughly. The results have been incredible. To date, this is just through our SAFE investigations. Over 200, almost 200 SAFE investigations have led to 2,100 arrests, the seizure of 485 pounds of fentanyl, and over 63,000 fentanyl pills. So what does that mean? 486 pounds of fentanyl, 63,000 fentanyl pills. That is enough fentanyl to kill approximately 1/3 of the population of the United States of America. We have 340 million people, so that's well over 100 million people that could be killed by that amount of fentanyl. So that's really, really serious business. And it's not just fentanyl, 545 pounds of cocaine, over 300 pounds of meth, 4.6 million in drug cash, 730 in drug-related firearms, and then 76 drug vehicles have been seized as a result of the program. So these are major cartel-linked operations that are operating in Florida communities, and our law enforcement is putting a stop to it. And that was one of the reasons why when we talked about the southern border so much, I'd have the critics, like obviously media and whatever, why do you care about the southern border? You're not on the southern border. Well, first of all, as an American, I care about having a border in a sovereign country, and I know people in Florida care about that too. So that's just the threshold. But what was coming across the border was not just staying in El Paso or Laredo or McAllen, Texas. It was going all across the United States of America. They wouldn't be running those operations with the drugs unless they could get it out across the United States of America. And so we knew from individuals coming, the contraband, all this stuff, that this would have a major impact on the state of Florida. And so the SAFE program was one of our ways that we fought back. And so if you look at some of the results, they are really, really encouraging. So FDLE agents in Orlando, Jacksonville, and Fort Myers earlier this month arrested multiple suspects that were part of a drug trafficking ring connected to a Mexican drug cartel. Coordinated takedown of these dangerous individuals all on the same day in different parts of the state is testament to the work that FDLE is doing. Their operations spanned 4 different states. One of the suspects was an illegal alien from Mexico with a standing deportation order. FDLE special agents worked for months to become embedded in these drug rings, both in Florida and in other states, so that they could uncover these drug trafficking networks. Several agents have even been close to being killed after a few undercover drug deals went bad. And thankfully, they were able to keep their cover and see these traffickers arrested, including right here in Orlando. Earlier this month in Orlando, FDLE arrested a high-level cartel member selling fentanyl and meth. They were able to seize more than 4.4 pounds of fentanyl during the bust. That's enough. 4.4 pounds of fentanyl could kill 1 million people. FDLE Orlando also arrested an illegal alien from Colombia, a former Colombian paramilitary leader responsible for cocaine trafficking and who had admitted to committing 29 murders. What are we doing with these people in our country? Are you kidding me? In South Florida, FDLE dismantled a fentanyl-laced meth ring that used street dealers at motels to flood communities. And then just weeks ago in the Florida Panhandle, an illegal alien and Gulf cartel human smuggler, previously deported twice, was arrested by FDLE and sentenced after being caught smuggling other illegal aliens from Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Colombia into the U.S. across the southern border during the Biden administration. So FDLE has really been tip of the spear on this. We appreciate that. But you've also had these local sheriff's departments that have done amazing work. So right here in Orlando, FDLE worked with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. They launched a multi-jurisdictional investigation known as Operation Burn, Baby Burn, that broke up a drug trafficking organization importing fentanyl from Mexico and from California. 17 arrests made, 6 pounds of fentanyl seized, 4 pounds of cocaine, enough fentanyl to kill 1.3 million individuals. Jacksonville, Operation Jacob's Ladder took down a Gulf cartel pipeline, sending monthly truckloads worth millions of dollars of meth, fentanyl, cocaine into Northeast Florida. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and FDLE arrested 14 suspects, seized 164 pounds of cocaine and enough fentanyl to kill more than 1 million Floridians. Over 75 pounds of other drugs were seized, along with an entire tractor trailer and 13 firearms. This now incapacitated criminal group sourced its illegal narcotics from Mexico via Texas through the Gulf Cartel, whose leader is nicknamed the Friend Killer. Cartel presence in Florida is significant because for years the cartels have been known to be the Mexican drug cartels operating in the Sunshine State, the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels, and they're both currently at war with each other. In Polk County, Sheriff Grady Judd's team, working with FDLE, seized 64 pounds of fentanyl in one case this June, enough to kill 14 million people. And they arrested cartel members tied to both of the Mexican cartels. This was the largest fentanyl seizure in the county's history. In fact, Polk County alone has seized more than 25% of all fentanyl captured as a result of the SAFE program. Polk's overall SAFE investigations have seized enough fentanyl to kill, in one county, 24 million Floridians. In Suwannee County, a rural county that often needs financial support from our SAFE program, FDLE worked with the Sheriff's Office to seize enough fentanyl to kill the entire county of Suwannee 43 times over. Rural sheriffs and their teams are often asked to do more with less, and SAFE gives these smaller counties the muscle to match big city cartels. In June of this year, FDLE and Suwannee County Sheriff's Office seized enough fentanyl to, as I mentioned, do significant damage in their county. So the SAFE program is working. This is something that we need to continue going. Last year, I recommended an additional $20 million so that we could keep our SAFE program operational. Now, the legislature did fund some of it, but not all of it. They funded $13 million, but this is something that absolutely deserves support in the next legislative session. So we have $7.7 million committed to active contracts. There's now about $5 million that are left for new contracts. Now, that may be enough to eke through the fiscal year, but it's not going to be enough to continue the momentum and continue to save lives. And so we will be recommending, when I roll out my budget later this year, additional funding for the SAFE program, and we will obviously work with the legislature to ensure that, and it's kind of rare where you fund something and then 2 years later you have significant deliverables. That's rare in government. Not as rare in Florida state government, but very rare throughout a lot of government. But these results are significant. These results have made our community safer. These results have saved the lives of many Floridians. And so I want to thank everybody that's been involved in this. This is a success story. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and I know the cartels aren't just going to fold up tent just because Florida has really gotten tough. And it's not just the SAFE program. I mean, we've also have very strong laws in place, in Florida. I became governor they were pushing to repeal Florida's truth in sentencing law so that people would have let out a lot of felons, and they wanted to be more lenient on things like fentanyl crimes. I put the kibosh on that, and so we now have really stringent penalties. And what Sheriff Lima and others will do is appropriately is, if you're dealing fentanyl and you sell it to somebody or give it to somebody who ends up overdosing and dying, you can be charged and should be charged with homicide. And that's what they're doing, because these people know that what they're doing, is killing people. So I want to applaud everyone that's been involved in that. We got to keep the momentum going. We can't just sit here and say, these are great successes and then just move on to other things. There's a lot of our family members, particularly our young people. You can make a dumb decision now and then, but you'd like to think you make a dumb decision, you wake up the next morning, you kind of realize you made a dumb decision and then just do. But this is, you may not get a second chance if you're taking something that has this amount of fentanyl in it. So people's lives are hanging in the balance. Okay, we're going to hear from some of our other speakers. So, Jay Collins, I think a lot of you know him by now, but he was our senator from Tampa. He is a retired Green Beret. He served 23 years in the Army, has a very distinguished record in a lot of these elite special forces units. But interestingly, in the course of his military service, he ended up, losing one of his legs. And so he had a decision about, his future, and he decided that he'd be the first person in Army history to re-qualify as a Green Beret with a prosthetic leg. And he set out to do it, and he did it. Then he served another 5 years in Special Forces with that. As a senator, he's been strong on all the issues that so many Floridians care about, very strong against illegal immigration, all of our border policies. He's been right there supporting, very strong on combating fentanyl and supporting law enforcement. Also was the guy that got our bill enacted to ban the CCP from buying land in the state of Florida, which is something that we led the nation on. And so on issue after issue, he has run into the fights, into the fire. That's what he did in uniform. That's what he's done in political office. And then even more recently, when the hostilities broke out with Israel and Iran, we had a lot of people from Florida over there. We had college students. We had other people. The airport was closed. They were, ballistic missiles were raining down. They asked for help. So the state of Florida, as we have been known to do, I authorized an emergency mission to exfil people from Israel and bring them back safely to the state of Florida. We ended up getting thousands of people out of Israel at that time to safety, and then we flew many of them from Cyprus back here. Jay was actually, he flew to Israel. He's on the ground, and he was personally rescuing people during that conflict while these Iranian ballistic missiles, were raining down. And, he served in Iraq, Afghanistan, all these places in his career. They didn't have those types of ballistic missiles. So that's like a new challenge, and yet he's there doing it. So I'm very excited to be able to watch him continue his work. And I want him to come up and say a few things right now about the fentanyl fight.
Well, thank you. It's good to see so many of you here today. And hard to live up to that billing, but I'll do my very, very best. First off, I want to address our law enforcement. Thank you for what you do in the community. It's not just the kinetic side of the job. It's what you do as community leaders, as beacons in the community that often I don't think we talk about enough. It isn't that primary risk. It isn't that secondary risk. It's also the gravity and the weight of what you do daily. That toll is also on your family. So we owe you the time, the tools, the training necessary to complete your mission, but more importantly, complete your mission and go back home safely to your families, because your moms and dads, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters who have other responsibilities as well, and I can't thank you enough for what you do. So you heard the governor talk about some amazing stats. That is good government. That is government focusing on things that matter, taking criminals out of our community, stopping the influx and inflow of criminals into our communities, and prioritizing people. There are many who want to talk politics, who want to play games on these issues, But let me tell you something. Here in Florida, that is not what we do. We will prioritize our people. We will keep you safe. And if you put our folks at risk, either via drugs, via crime, we will hunt you down, we will bring you back, and you will face justice, and you will be held accountable. That is a God's truth and promise each and every day. So let's talk about the SAFE program. You heard about the arrests. You heard about what it did to our community and how many people pulled off the street. You heard about the risks with fentanyl. Think about those numbers. One of those was 24 million people could have been killed by the stash of fentanyl found. That's the population of Florida. How many times over? How many pounds are being pulled from this state? How many lives are being changed? How many lives are being saved because of the heroism of community leaders? So when we talk about having your back, we don't have your back when it's easy. We have your back 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24/7, because that's how you serve the community, and I want you to know that our government does the same thing for you. Let's talk about what our FDLE leaders do. You know, your job is so multifaceted. You coordinate and work with so many agencies, so many personalities, but the results speak for themselves. Putting your neck on the line, leading something this dynamic, finding ways to solve problems that people haven't done before, i.e. getting outside our borders, getting out there in the water and interdicting them before they come to the state. That's life-changing. That changes policy. That puts new perspective on an old mission. You know, it's a blessing to get to serve our governor, our state, our people, the way I do as lieutenant governor. But when I tell you politics wasn't the plan, y'all, I unequivocally mean that. I wanted to be on a boat in the Gulf fishing with my kids after 23 years as a Green Beret. But you know what matters? Leadership matters. Look at where we are as a state. Look at where we have come from to where we are, and our future is bright because people stood in the breach, protected you from things like this, stood up for the things that matter, and now we are an economic juggernaut, an educational juggernaut as a state, and people are coming here and fleeing states with liberal ideology. Recently, you saw that I had the opportunity to fly to California and bring back that individual who killed 3 people on our roads. You know, we were accused of that being performative, but let me explain something here. Leadership isn't sitting at a desk. Leadership is getting out here and addressing the issues, getting out there and dealing with the problem firsthand. Now, I don't know what many people thought, but I wasn't really sure what Gavin Newsom was going to do, how California was going to stand up. Do you think they espouse our values? How many lives have been lost because of Gavin Newsom's failed policies, his inability to stand up for the American citizen? We're done with that here in Florida. We don't do it that way. We will never do it that way, and we are not going back because each of you, your families, your lives matter, and that is what we're focusing on right now. So just to bring this thing in for a landing, guys, if you put people at risk, if you bring drugs across our border, if you stand up and you push back against our law enforcement, we have their back. They will find you. You will be held accountable, and you will go to jail and serve your time because we care about our people. We care about the rule of law, and Florida is the shining city within our nation. We are that state that leads. Remember, when America wins, Florida is leading. We are those people. We led from the front, and we will not go back. So thank you. God bless you, and God bless these United States.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you to Governor DeSantis for being here today. It's an honor to have you guys here to talk about the success that FDLE and our law enforcement partners have had fighting this very, very bad drug. I want to talk to you from being a law enforcement officer almost 30 years now. I'll submit to you that this is the most successful drug fighting program that I have ever seen. And you'll see a lot of other law enforcement agencies say the same thing out in Florida. The results speak for themselves. And because of Governor DeSantis' program, under the SAFE program, we have been very successful. The FDLE agents that you see standing behind you and many, many more out in the field, they risk their lives every day out there with their partners that work with us from our local law enforcement agencies. They get after it and they fight fentanyl drug trafficking, specifically cartel-sourced drugs. Fentanyl that is taken off the street came from across the border. We have direct intelligence that leads it straight to the cartels that have all been listed by the president as being terrorist organizations. There's been millions of United States citizens, hundreds of thousands of Florida citizens that have been killed by this drug. The governor, Lieutenant Governor Collins, they get after it, and we follow their lead. We pursue them, and we hunt these guys. They are bad, and that is our business. The men and women in law enforcement, they do not tolerate this. They know the damage that it brings to the communities. You heard from the governor and lieutenant governor the statistics. They're quite impressive. Our local law enforcement partners and us, we would not be able to accomplish that without the funding from the SAFE program. We will be lucky to make it through through the end of this fiscal year without additional funding. This program has been very beneficial to Florida. I'll submit to you that the agents you see here behind me and our law enforcement partners that we work with, they have saved thousands of lives in Florida, actually millions if you take a look at it. Because every drug dealer that's been taken off the street, it sends a ripple effect, and it resolves many other issues. These are not small-time drug dealers or users that have been taken off. All of these traffickers, over 2,000, they are drug traffickers. They are not users. Those are the ones that we target. The funding that comes from the SAFE program allows us to identify those threats, zero in on them, and eliminate them from our communities. They get lengthy prison sentences. And it's not just a one-time hit for them. Many times these cases go into what we call racketeering investigations. And the penalty is severe for those. Decades in prison so that they cannot impact our communities anymore. And I'll close lastly by saying I want to thank Sheriff Lima, and I want to thank Sheriff Judd, Sheriff Chad Chronister, and many, many more of our law enforcement partners. It'd take me a bit to name them all, for the fantastic work that they do out there for Florida every day. These guys, they really get after it, and it's an honor to work with them. And I'll close by saying it's a highly motivating thing whenever you have your state leaders come in to where you're at and speak about the success of the results. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, Sheriff.
Well, good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I am so incredibly proud to live in a state that has a governor and a lieutenant governor who has wore the uniform of our country, protecting our domestic and international freedoms. That is incredibly rare. So I come to you today as the sheriff of Seminole County, but also the president of Major County, former president of Major County Sheriffs of America, and current president of the Florida Sheriffs. And I can tell you from working with Governor DeSantis from the early stages of his advocacy, he has not stopped. Actually, he deserves a lot more credit than what anyone has ever given him on this fight. Not just him, but First Lady Casey DeSantis as well, because in the early stages of this, she clearly was all in on her advocacy to protect our most vulnerable of our communities, and that is our kids. And her work has been instrumental and actually has an effect across the entire country. So let's talk about some of the legislative efforts that Governor DeSantis made it as a priority and delivered on. One, minimum mandatory sentences for people who are trafficking in fentanyl within our community. That is so incredibly important. There was a law for the longest time here in the state of Florida that determined that a murder case had to meet a criteria of proximate cause of death. Again, working with our legislative partners, the governor was able to bring home to change that to substantial factor, allowing us to charge drug dealers with murder. And in Seminole County alone, we've charged nearly 50 drug dealers with first-degree murder for dealing deadly doses of drugs on our street. But it didn't end there. We also recognized that there was a problem because we knew the life-saving effects of administering Narcan, reversing the effects of a drug overdose. But the drug dealer, when they dealt the drugs and somebody was revived with Narcan, was literally getting away with murder because the person did not die. Not here in the state of Florida any longer. Now we have the ability to charge the drug dealer with second-degree felony culpable negligence when somebody, whether a private citizen or a public safety professional, revives somebody with the use of Narcan. Last and certainly not least, we found that as more people were going into the treatment spaces, There was always an increased penalty for drug dealers selling drugs in proximity to areas of vulnerability, school, church, playground, but no increased penalty for a drug dealer selling drugs in proximity to a location where somebody was actually getting treatment. Now in the state of Florida, that increased penalty is in effect, so we can charge drug dealers with that increased penalty. Sheriffs from out the state, it does not matter whether we're here in Orlando. You could have this press conference anywhere in the state, and I can promise you 67 sheriffs in the great state of Florida would stand at the lectern, deliver the same message that this is a crisis that we've never experienced before, and the safe funds and resources provided us with a network of support, and especially for the smaller counties, as the governor was saying, resources to combat these very sophisticated drug cartels. If you watch what has happened, Chinese had the precursor chemicals, and they were sending it over here. The two major drug cartels, Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the Sinaloa, sent their chemists down with the Chinese chemists to learn how to do this. Fentanyl, you've heard the stats of deaths over and over again. It is 100 times more potent than morphine, 50 times more potent than heroin, or a microgram, not even visible to the human eye, is a lethal dose. This is why it's such a significant problem. Our partners with FDLE are the best in the business, and I'm telling you, last year we did an operation called Operation Black Ice. We typically name these operations after the lead agent names an operation, so you hear these different names. But Operation Black Ice was a partnership between FDLE, the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, Volusia and Orange County, and nearly every municipality in between. This was a 6-month operation using resources from this SAFE program. Let me give you just kind of a snapshot of what the results were. There were more than 50 pounds of cocaine, 4 pounds of fentanyl, 4 pounds of black tar and brown heroin, 23 guns that were taken off the street. The mastermind behind this thing had a sophisticated drug trafficking organization that connected directly with the cartels. It resulted in 33 arrests of individuals. Let me just highlight 2 of the arrests to emphasize the importance of this program. One person that was arrested was actually the manager at a local UPS store. And when people would send UPS packages, working with the drug trafficking organization, he would intercept the package and deliver the package himself as a part of this sophisticated ring. Another person that was involved was found with 50 pounds of cocaine at his house when we executed a search warrant. Another was in prison in Jackson County and had a murder for hire plot for somebody who owed him drug money. He was paying other inmates on the inside that we were able to work at Appalachia State Correctional Facility to have somebody murdered there. And in addition to that, he was arranging drones to fly cell phones and other types of contraband over rec yards and drop them on the rec yards. This is an operation that is just us in Seminole County in Central Florida, but is going on across the state with the assistance of the SAFE program. And I got to tell you, we have so much to be proud of here. I mentioned that serving in that role with the major county sheriffs of America, the largest sheriff's offices in the country, and because of Governor DeSantis, First Lady Casey DeSantis, our former Attorney General, now Senator Ashley Moody, and our current Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, we are the envy of policing authorities across the entire country. And I am so grateful for the governor and his team to be able to make that happen. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Sheriff. Thanks for all the good work. And Sheriff Grady Judd was mentioned, and Polk's doing a great job. Obviously, we've worked with so many sheriffs, and in Central Florida, Wayne Ivey, one of the best. We do have the best sheriffs in the country, and I think that's something that's very meaningful. And I know that we've developed a very strong relationship across the country amongst the law enforcement community. Because we're doing it right. And anywhere I go, people will say that. In fact, I remember I was out in Southern California a year or 2 ago and meet one of the local police chiefs in a very nice community. And he's like, and I'm like, how you doing? He's like, I'm doing great, Governor, but all my police officers want to move to Florida now because of what you guys are doing. And we do give you a $5,000 signing bonus, but it really isn't that as much as it's just they want to be in a culture that is putting public safety at the forefront, that isn't indulging in any of these ideological escapades where, releasing people from prison is somehow going to make everybody safer, or not prosecuting criminals and let them commit all these crimes. Like those are those approaches have tried. They're busts. They've really destroyed and hollowed out some of our previously great American cities, and so we're obviously not letting that happen in Florida. And with respect to the fentanyl, having strong penalties matters. And I'm not, saying that we're gonna get to a point where no one will ever want to come here and sell this stuff, because obviously, they're taking a risk. They can make a lot of money, and so they're willing to take the risk. But I do think there's something to be said for being tough and deterring. Maybe they make a different calculation about where in the U.S. they want to go. There was that story, actually CNN did it. It was like a year or so ago, and it was a illegal alien gang. It was a theft ring, and they were like looting stores in New York City, stealing from, I think, personal possession and personal residences, and they'd steal all this stuff, and then they'd sell it. And then they'd take the money and they'd come down to Florida and they would party and have fun and do all that. And then they go back to New York. And so the person from CNN is like, well, if you're spending all the money in Florida, why are you going back to New York to steal? Why don't you just stay in Florida? And they said, because in Florida, when we steal, they put us in jail. And so they did not want to mess with that. And I do just want to, because the sheriff had mentioned it, it is interesting. Lieutenant Governor Collins, I had mentioned his background. Florida, out of all 50 states, we're the only state in the United States that has a governor and a lieutenant governor who are both military veterans. I mean, just one of 50 states. Of course, he doesn't want me to remind him, as a Navy guy, that, that Navy won the Army-Navy game last year, so we'll see what happens. It had been a little bit of rough sledding for a few years there, and then Navy they were underdogs, no question, and then kind of got back on it. But it's been interesting to see Army's program they have done very well over the last 10 years or whatnot, and so we'll be we'll do all we can to prevent open warfare from the governor's office when we have this year's Army-Navy game. All right, we have any questions back there? Yes, ma'am. So a couple things. So I would draw a distinction between rank and file law enforcement and the law enforcement agencies in Orange County and the state attorney in Orange County. She obviously is not gung-ho about doing what needs to be done. And, we've obviously held her accountable in the past. She's back. And so, we have to see. But I think that they are on law enforcement rank and file. I think a lot of those folks are working really hard. The reality is it takes two to tango on this. You could have the best policing in the world if you don't have a prosecutor who's really going to be strong on bringing these. Like, for example, Sheriff, how many homicide cases have you guys had with the fentanyl?
Just shy of 50.
Just shy of 50. If that were in Orange County, would they have a chance to have gotten all those charges, homicides? No way, right? She just wouldn't do it. Her approach is a liberal approach to, I would say, fighting crime. To basically, her approach is to not be as strong as we need to be, and to have a thumb on the scale in favor of the defendants. So these guys are bringing people to justice. They're treating them like the murderers that they are in Seminole and Brevard and in other parts of Florida. You're not seeing that here. So I don't blame law enforcement for that, the people that are in the sheriff's departments or the police departments, as much as I think it's a function of the prosecutor's agenda. Now, you get elected, you can make judgment calls to a certain extent, but there are limits to that discretion. And when these prosecutors, Soros-backed, have done where they've exceeded their discretion and ended up neglecting core duties, I've removed them from their posts. And that's something that I have no doubt that what we've done in that regard has saved lives. I have no doubt that it's saved lives, 100%. So we're going to be ready, willing, and able to do what we need to do. But let's do, yes. All right. Hooah.
Alligator Alcatraz. Is it a dead alligator? President Trump is not looking too well. He's looking very sickly. What's your opinion?
So on alligator Alcatraz, just understand what happened. It's running. Deportations are continuing. You had a very partisan judge that issued a ruling saying that that DHS couldn't send any more there until, whatever. So we immediately, they appealed, we're doing that. So DHS hasn't sent more, but all that stay stuff, that's happening right now. We stand ready, willing, and able to accept who DHS sends. Remember, our role at the state, we don't conduct the actual deportations. We process, stage, and then DHS takes them away. And because we've had alligator Alcatraz, you've had thousands and thousands of deportations that might not otherwise have happened because they didn't have enough room to be able to do it. So we're ultimately going to win that fight. Now, I also announced that we had demand even beyond alligator Alcatraz, and so we have this deportation depot up in Northeast Florida, Baker County, right next door to Jacksonville. So that'll be able to hold another 1,000 to 1,500. Now, one of the reasons why we did alligator Alcatraz is because that's an airport down there. And so they built the temporary facilities with federal reimbursement. I mean, I hear people say, oh, Florida is out this money. No, we spent money and we will get reimbursed. And getting illegals out, that saved you money because they are costly if they go to the medical care or all this other stuff. But we're getting reimbursed for all that stuff. So Florida will clearly benefit from a taxpayer perspective. I don't think there's any question about that, given all that's said and done. But there's the runway right there. So you go a couple thousand feet and DHS can pick them up and go. So that was why it was really attractive from an efficiency perspective. Baker County is not far from the Lake City Airport. It's just going to require loading people and driving. It's like maybe 10 minutes down the road, and then they can be flown out of Lake City. So that will happen. That will be good. We're also working because we were up in Panama City, talking with law enforcement. And, you're in the Panhandle, sending to alligator Alcatraz, that's a long way. Even sending to the deportation depot in North Florida, that could be 3 to 5 hours depending on where you are in the Panhandle. And so, they were like, is there a way we can get a facility that's going to be closer to us? And so we said yes. So we're actually in the process of figuring out how we can set up a Panhandle pokey. And we're going to have that in the Panhandle. And so the mission continues. And so I think like some of the report act like, oh, well, DHS isn't sending any more there. Therefore, no, DHS hasn't sent us any more since that judge ruled. But this week, we're applying to have that decision stayed. Here's what they did, this is so outrageous. So this is a Collier-Dade airport, and it's actually located in Collier County. Dade does run it, but it's actually in Collier. So it's kind of, we're the uninhabited part of southern Florida. And so you have that there. It's been there for decades. So we said, we had been working with the feds on all the immigration stuff. We have all these 287G. We've done more to facilitate the president's agenda on this than any other state by far. But the one thing they kept saying is, look, we don't have enough DHS facilities to stage and to process before they're sent back to their home countries. And it's not as simple as just, hey, you go, like there is a process, like they are getting due process. Now, some of these people have already had due process. They've already ordered to be removed, and yet they still haven't followed that order. So it may vary depending, but the bottom line is you do need something. So that's why they said, is there a way you can expand capacity? Well, Sheriff Lima, they've got criminals, normal criminals they've got to deal with. Like, we can't say, like, oh, the local jails should just have to do this. Now, they have done it to a certain extent, but there's definitely a limit to that. Our state prisons, we have people who get convicted, go to state prison. And so we're like, okay, we'll work to do it. So we did the one at Dade Collier Airport, Alligator Alcatraz, because you have the runway right there. And it was our view, once they were there, they weren't going to escape, and then they could be flown out. And I think that has actually worked very well. And they have picked up the pace of deportations. So people sued, and they said, oh, no, you can't do that. Why? You didn't do an environmental impact statement. That's what it was. That was the crux of the suit. Now, the state, we don't have to do a federal environmental impact statement when we're doing business on our own property. Like, we don't have to do it. It's not a requirement. The federal government does have to do it when they're doing certain things, and that is law, and I think it gets abused, but it is the law. So, we didn't do it because we're not required to do it. What the judge said was, well, since you're doing this to help the feds, it really is a federal facility, and therefore they didn't do the environmental impact statement. So even if somehow we don't get a stay, DHS, they can generate an impact statement. The impact is negligible because it's all self-contained on the existing airport footprint. We're not doing sewage or any of that. They truck the waste out. They bring all this in. We obviously weren't going to do anything that was going to undercut all the stuff I've done for Everglades restoration. And so that was all buttoned up. So that's what the judge, oh, you didn't do that. The federal government is really running it, even though they're not. Therefore, they had to do it. So I do think we're going to win that fight, and I think that we'll have that. But we're also going to have deportation depot. We Panhandle, Pokey, and then we're also looking in other areas. And so I think the net of this, there's a demand to have way more than just Alligator Alcatraz. I mean, the reality is, if this judge's ruling stands, even if we continue with these other facilities, DHS will not have enough space. It will be harmful to the efforts. It'll be harmful for the state of Florida. So we're very confident that they're going to do. And DHS, I think their position is, look, if a judge tells us not to send to that facility, then we'll send them other places. And that's fine. That's their prerogative to do. But it's still being operated. We're going to, and a lot of people have been taken out of there for sure. So I would just say stay tuned on that. The mission continues. We are going to ensure that the laws are enforced and that people here are illegally, particularly those who have already been ordered to be deported. We've got 70,000 people in the state of Florida alone that have final deportation orders that haven't been executed. Obviously, Biden wasn't executing any of this stuff. So just that, we need. But you need infrastructure to do it. So I think that's all going to work out. The reality is, it's funny because, you have like a narrative when it was set up, and a lot of people in legacy media, but also on the left, oh, this is so bad. It's so bad that you have this. Then when a judge says don't send any more, they're like, oh, see, you're not accepting any more. That's so bad that you're not getting. I'm like, which is it? Did you not want it, or do you want it? Do you want it to keep operating? So the mission continues. We'll supplant any hurdles that we do, but ultimately we're there to facilitate the mission, to help the federal government using our own facilities, using our own personnel or contract, however they end up doing it. But everything we're doing on this mission, everything we're doing is reimbursable from FEMA. So, Biden was reimbursing the hotels for housing illegal aliens in Manhattan. The Trump administration is reimbursing states for helping with the detention and processing prior to them being repatriated to their own country. And I think that's the way it should be. Yes. We will, it is momentarily. We will have an announcement on that maybe pretty soon. We may, you'll find out pretty soon, I think. I mean, we said it would, the runway we said when I announced it is basically the timeline that we'll be on. Yes. Well, you don't have a First Amendment right to commandeer someone else's property. You have a First Amendment right to paint your own property and knock yourself out if that's what you want to do. But when you have a state crosswalk or a state road, the law in the state of Florida is now that there's not markings or that's not going to be used for those purposes. FDOT issued a memo to explain that a couple months ago. Everybody's been on notice about that. But, this is kind of an instructive civics lesson here. You do not have a right to take somebody else's property for your messaging purposes. Like, that's never been what the First Amendment has said. And, you know, we just got to be clear on that. And I'd also say, you know, I've approved a lot of money for a Pulse Memorial. Where is it? Why haven't they gotten that done? A lot of money has been frittered away over the years. I think I'm certainly supportive of an actual fitting memorial for people that were murdered that day. One of the most horrific mass killings in American history. Yeah, I've approved a lot of money for that over the years. But that's not for some crosswalk. That's not to do those other things that are different from state law. So look, what I will say is this: most places in Florida, 95%, and there were other things that were marking before this bill went in. We had Blue Lives Matter, which, you know, I've been supportive of that. But, you know, we're not going to use our roads for that, right? And so hang up a flag, do what you want on your building, your house, however you want to do it. But we're not going to be doing that on our state roadways. And I think this is the best policy. I think it's just, you know, some of the stuff that was going on, you know, over the last couple years, it's just, it's too much to have this. And then what will happen is it creates safety hazards. One, people just seeing it, but then you have some people who may disagree with the message, and then they're incentivized to try to like peel out or something. Now they get held, but it's just, why are we even, you know, going down this road? So we are going to make sure that, you know, that law is enforced in an even-handed way. I don't care what your message is. Use it by yourself. You can say it. You project it how you want on your property. You can do all the things that we've always been able to do, but just don't use other people's property to do it. Well, yeah, look, I mean, I'm under no illusions about the state attorney from Osceola and Orange County. I mean, I think it's likely going to be political decisions. I get that. I understand that. But the reality is our role from the FDOT's perspective, Florida Department of Transportation, is to make sure the roads remain clean. Make sure that the roads remain clear of this. We're not going to say, you know, well, you know, this community, that community can do it, but not you, not you. No, we're just going to say the roads aren't going to be used for those purposes. Now, there's Delray Beach, I think, has a hearing in Orlando today. I think Key West is tomorrow in front of FDOT. They have basically taken the position, even though the law is what it is, even though FDOT has issued guidance, that they should just be able to be a law unto themselves and do whatever they want. And look, you know, that's not the way this system of government operates. Like, we have elections, people get elected, they pass legislation. I, as governor, sign this into law. So not only do I have a right to make sure that it's enforced, I have a duty to do it. And I took an oath to discharge the office and to do all that. So they just decide they don't like the law. They want to do what they want to do. That just isn't going to fly. It is not going to fly. So eventually FDOT will be able to correct it in Delray and correct it in Key West. But I would note, a lot of other places had stuff, and once they were apprised of the new policy, they were like, fine. And they basically said, yeah, that's the law, that's the law. So it's only in certain areas where you've had folks think that they shouldn't abide by it. But most of the places in Florida have understood that. And that's with messaging that, you know, probably a lot of people in this room would be supportive of. That is not allowed either, because we're just saying that's not what the roads are for. Yes? It's not political at all. I mean, the reality is, we were here with Blaise Angolia, the chief financial officer, who's doing a fantastic job. I mean, he is a bulldog when it comes to standing up for taxpayers. And isn't that what you want in a chief financial officer? We want to highlight the growth of these local government budgets. We have people that will come to us and say they're getting pinched by property taxes because their homes are being valued for more than what it was. And by the way, what goes up goes down. I mean, what was your home valued at in 2006 compared to 2010? You remember that period? Probably worth more in 2006 than it was in 2010 in almost every instance, I would imagine, given what happened with the market. So these things go up and down. So folks come, and then, you know, I have to usually remind folks, your property taxes are local. They're under Florida's Constitution. The millage, all that is set by these local taxing authorities. The money goes to them. and then they use it. We don't rely on property tax revenue at the state level. We have sales tax, we have some other things. We just got rid of the business rent tax, eliminated that tax, and we've eliminated other taxes. And we're happy to do it. And we're one of the lowest taxes state in the country. Certainly on a per capita basis, we're probably the lowest. So you have that. So we are at a position where we want to be able to help with property tax. But it's not something I can just ask the legislature, hey, cut the millage, do this, do that, because they don't have constitutional authority to do the local taxes. That is your counties and your cities. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a question on the ballot that is going to allow Floridians to be able to vote themselves relief from property tax. And as I said, my vision is, if you own your home, to truly own it, you have to own it free and clear of the government. You shouldn't have to pay rent to the government. And, there'll be people that are, buying investment properties, fine, that's different. There's differences, but your personal home, we really believe should not be subject to tax. It's an unrealized gain. And I'm just one that's if you tax me at point of sale, I buy a car and I pay a sales tax on it. But for me to then just, pay a tax on the value every now, cars usually when you drive them off the lot go down. Now during COVID, the cars actually went up in value. You'd buy a car, there was such a shortage that you could drive it off the lot and then you could even flip it for $5,000-$10,000 profit because there was such a rush to buy vehicles. But that's our vision. So. And of course, so what do people say? Oh, that can't be done. You can't do that. And my question is why can't it be done? Look, the first place we went to with these audits was Broward County, Florida. They got 1.9 million people. They've had no net population growth over the last 5 years. Their budget's increased 60%. So the question is okay, why is it increased 60%? That's the whole reason that we're doing the DOGE, and we're also doing it on state agencies and our state universities. And we're looking at a whole host of things, not just spending. We're also looking at some policies of universities, and we're looking at how certain things are done in practice. Because, you have the law on the books, which in Florida, we were the first state to eliminate DEI from our public universities, and we did that years ago. But are you repackaging that under another name? Is that being smuggled into lower levels of university? So we're looking at all that stuff, and we're looking at ways state agencies can do better. Although I do point out, if you look, the budget that we're under right now in Florida is spending less than last year's budget, and last year's budget spent less than the year before. I don't think there's many places that are actually reducing spending while still doing major things like teacher salary increases, moving Florida forward. I mean, our I-4 stuff we're doing has already made a big impact. We do a lot more there, billions, and we're proud of doing that. But we're doing it on a budget. But yet so I could say, since I've been governor, we've retired almost half of the state's taxpayer-supported debt for all its history. We're the second lowest per capita spending in the country. New York has 3 million, 4 million fewer residents. Their budget's twice as much as ours. We don't need to be. No, you can always do better. So that's our view on that. But on the local governments, people are getting pinched by property taxes, and you're getting pinched to fund budgets that have greatly expanded. So the question is there room to be able to give you the property tax relief you want while pulling back some of the bloat that's happened over these last 4 or 5 years? And so the DOGE efforts are really, one, standing up for taxpayers, but two, letting people have the information about where their money's going when they're having to pay property tax every year. What is that going towards? And do you want to change that relationship you have with these local governments so that they can't keep picking your pocket, just for living in your own home? So that's what's good. That's it's not political or partisan. It's something that I think has a lot of interest across party lines, because it isn't like if you're one party or the other that you're happy that your property taxes have gone up. I don't think anybody's happy with that, especially when they haven't realized the gain. It's one thing if you sell your house, you get a new one, and you have a different tax basis, maybe it's taxed more. People are just living in their home, and they're having to pay more taxes, even when the millage rate isn't increased because the assessments, oh, your property is worth 200,000, 300,000 more, 400,000 more. And it's like, man, and here's the thing, you will get assessed higher. You know, I don't know how aggressive they are at assessing you lower when the market goes down. That's, you know, I don't know. Like maybe some do. I know we've got some property appraisers who are probably pretty stand up around the state, but the reality is it's usually a one-way ratchet. So that's what we're leaning, that's what we're moving towards. Blaze is really doing a great job. And the fact of the matter is Orange County was not cooperative. He has the authority, and then the state also has additional authority with the most recent budget. So when you have people reading off a prepared script and not willing to answer questions, as a taxpayer, is that acceptable to you? No, of course not. So this is something that I think is important. I think compliance is obviously required under the law, and I expect to see that. But I think Blaze has been good. You know, he's been very hard on Manatee County, which is a very red county. I mean, I'd have to look at the election results. I mean, you know, when I was running, I think we won it by like 30 points. It is not a liberal county by any stretch. He's also looked at like places in the Panhandle and elsewhere. So it isn't just the blue dots like Orlando and Orange County and Broward. Those are included. Gainesville's included too. I mean, they've got a lot of issues. But it really is across the board for all taxpayers. So I'm proud of what Blaze Ingoli is doing. I think we need somebody in that position that's going to be very aggressive at being an advocate for the taxpayers. And I think you're going to see that there's a lot of this, because you think about it, you know, if you're elected to one of these boards, commissioners, you're there, and then especially during COVID, it's like, okay, the whole world comes to Florida, right? People move to Florida. Some people just vacationed in Florida. Some people just wanted to get away from the insanity elsewhere. So what happens is your coffers swell. So they're getting, property values are going up. People are buying homes, a lot of times sight unseen. You go back to like 2021, 22, people were buying homes without even seeing them. They'd be on the market and like an hour later it'd be sold. That was happening frequently in Florida. And so you had this rush, and then they're buying homes and the values are going up and the prices are going up. And that means more money is flowing into these coffers. And so how many of the local governments responded by doing really significant property tax reductions? Not very many did that. They basically spent the money. And there's also other things about, you know, do they put money away? What do they have here? All this other stuff. So people deserve the truth on this, and I think that the audits that Blaze are leading, you know, it's we've called it the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, our FAFO audits, and you know, I think it's something that's really, really good for the people of the state of Florida. But you got to stand with taxpayers. I mean, we're the free state of Florida because we respect taxpayers. We do that at the state level more than anywhere. But we need to do it at the local level as well. All right, thanks, everybody.